All right, guys, let's have a look at Blender. What I've got down in the bottom corner here is just a little window that's going to identify what buttons I push. So I'm tapping the right mouse button, etc. W, whatever, X, etc. It'll show those things up there so that you can see what I'm clicking on. Or a lot of the time I'll say something and you can just double check that I'm doing the right thing down here. Or if you're not sure what's going on, you can always look down there to see what buttons I'm actually pushing. Blender is a pretty advanced tool. And first thing we're going to do though is just do a few little setup things. Make our lives a little bit easier. So if you go into File and then go down to Preferences, except it's gone for me. There it is, User Preferences. You want to go to Interface, and in Interface there's nothing you need to change in there. I'm looking for it. There's one thing that we're going to change. This bit here, Global Undo Steps, just turn it all the way up to 256. Okay, let's turn it all the way up. That'll mean that you can actually undo things a lot more. 32 is not a lot, so turn that up to 256. For input, if you would like to change it to left mouse so that you can select, that'll cause a lot of problems later on, especially with tutorial, but if you find that it's easier, you can do that. I prefer just to leave it at right mouse. Don't change anything else here. Themes. Okay, this is the fun part. You may select a different theme. Okay, if you want a cool white theme, different themes down here. There's not a lot of them that are available, but you can change to a different theme. I'm just going to use this one here, which is, I think, the original one. I'm not sure if it's the same one as I had before. Anyway, once you've picked a theme and you have turned undo steps up to 256, click Save User Settings down the bottom, and we're ready to go. You can close this window. Let's make sure that's full screen. All right, so Blender. We have got a lot of things to get through here. This here is your 3D viewport. Inside the viewport, the default is there's a cube, there is a light source. I'm right clicking to select these things. And there is a camera. Now navigation is really important in 3D, so it's the first thing we're going to look at. If you get your middle mouse button, you can spin around. Okay, so hold down that middle mouse button. You can spin around in 3D and it will spin around what you are focused on. Okay, so the center of the view, which currently happens to be right there. If you hold Shift and middle mouse button, you can see down there it says I'm only holding one. It's the left Shift key. The right Shift key will do it as well. But left Shift key, I can pan. So we've got rotate and we've got pan. Now I'm looking here, and you'll see when I rotate, it rotates around the point that I'm looking at, which is roughly here in the center of the screen. Now let's say I want to get back to this. I can click it and push the full stop key on the number pad. It actually says delete, but it's not the delete key, it's the full stop on the number pad, which is on the far right, just next to the enter key, next to the 0, and that'll focus in on that object that you've got selected. The scroll wheel will zoom in and out, like so. So you can zoom in and out, you can zoom way out, zoom way in. If you happen to zoom so far out and you're not sure, and then you've panned and you rotate and you just can't find where you are, push the full stop, you'll go back to the cube, and you're back in business. All right, now with this cube, if I want to delete this cube, I can push X to delete the cube. But we're going to go a step further. We're going to push the letter A. And you want to make sure that you've got an orange selection on all of these. A selects all. Then I'm going to delete everything. Okay, so we're just going to start off with nothing. We don't need a light source. We don't need a camera at the moment. So I've got nothing here because I've deleted everything. And I'm going to go down the bottom here, add mesh. Now a mesh is a collection of faces, and faces are made up of 4 or 3 vertices. They can be made up of more, but generally in Blender they're made up of 3 or 4 vertices, often called a polygon or a tri. So I'm going to add in a cube again. Now it adds it in wherever that 3D cursor is. One of the things that I've noticed previous classes doing is getting really confused about what this 3D cursor does. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you how to reset this 3D cursor to the center. Control-Shift-S saves. So that's not what I wanted to do. It has changed on me. I've forgotten the shortcut key. There we go, Shift-S. Okay, so I'm going to set the cursor to the center. That'll set it straight back to the center there. Okay, so you can see that it's set it straight back to there. I can set the cursor to selected. That'll set it to the center of my selected object. And this is really, really handy. In fact, you probably won't realize how powerful this can be until you really need it. Set the cursor to the active object if I've got more than one thing. Set the cursor to the grid. That'll align it with the grid, the nearest grid point. But I'm going to set it back to the center. Then when I add in a mesh, another cube, you see it's right there in the center. I'm going to delete both those cubes. And we're going to add in a cube again. Okay, we'll just get used to adding and deleting stuff here. I'm going to move this cube around. There's a few ways you can move it around. I like to move it using these handles. Okay, so you can just grab them with the left button and move them along there. Now undo it a little bit, Control Z. Oops, I'll just add that back in. Add mesh cube. If I hold Control while I move it around, it'll snap to grid points. Okay, so if I look at top down, you can see it's snapping to those grid points. If I want to be exact with something, I can snap it to those grid points and hold Control. So that's pretty useful as well. Snap it to those grid points and hold Control. I can also rotate. There is another way to translate, sorry. Translating is, this is called translating. It's a 3D term for move. The other way to translate something is with the G key. So if I push G, it grabs it and I can move it around anywhere I want. Now, that's not really that useful because it's kind of moving it based on what I'm viewing, which is not too good. So what I can do though, is I can push X. Oops. So G to grab it and then X. You see now it's highlighted that red axis and it's only going to let me move it along that red axis. If I push Y, it's going to highlight the green axis. It'll only let me move it across there. And if I push Z, now I'm not holding down the mouse button or anything. Okay, you don't need to do that in Blender. You're not clicking and dragging. All I've done is push G and then Z, and the mouse is just letting me move it. All right, it's the same with rotating. If I rotate, currently, if you imagine like I stick a skewer all the way through it from my vision where I can see it straight through, and then I go to rotate it. Okay, I can rotate it around that invisible skewer. Usually, that's not where you want to rotate it around, so you can push X and you rotate it around that axis, or Y and rotate it around that axis, or Z and rotate it around that axis. Once again, holding Control, you'll get more accuracy. It'll go in 5-degree increments, which is quite handy. The last thing is scale, and that is S. So scale is the S key, and you can scale it really big, down really small, etc. You can also scale it along the X, along the Y, and along the Z. Now I want you to practice a few of those things because what we're going to do shortly is start to make something a little bit different. So what I'd like you to do is just to replicate pretty much exactly what I've got here. Well, obviously not a cube. I'm going to do the things. So I am going to scale this along the Z axis and then move it up so its base is just on, kind of on the grid. It doesn't have to be exact. It's fine. That's all good there. Okay. Now I'm going to duplicate that. Over here there is a duplicate button, but the duplicate button is Shift D if you want to know what the shortcut is. I'm going to duplicate it and move it to the right. But as I move it, I'm going to push the Y key so it moves exactly to the right. Then I'm going to scale it along the z-axis, scale it like this, maybe a little bit higher. Duplicate it again, move it to the right, scale it along the z, duplicate it again, move it to the right, scale it along the z, duplicate it again, move it to the right. And if you get it in the wrong place, you can hit G and then Y again. Scale it like that. Okay, so I've just got multiple different shapes like that. Then I'm going to go back to this one, right click it, Shift D, duplicate it, move it along the x-axis, scale it upwards, and then repeat that once more along the x. Oops. So G, I accidentally did that, move it along the x-axis, and then scale it up along the z-axis. Okay, so I've got something that looks like that. It's not anything in particular. It's just a little practice task so you get used to scaling things along axes and moving things along axes. Okay, this is foundational. You need to be able to do this in order to move on. Okay, so this is your task. I'd like to see that done by the end of the period. Obviously, if you're not in my class, I mean, you don't have a deadline. You don't need to email me your progress. If you can get this done, then pat yourself on the back. But when you do get it done for the guys in class, I'd like to see it, and then we can move on.